and on location at our beautiful Old Westbury 604-acre campus. We offer a variety of majors to choose from and a wonderful opportunity to discover the leader in you. Please visit us at oldwestbury.edu.
I'm your host, Joe Haynor. I'm an adjunct professor in the PEL department at SUNY at Old Westbury. Today's program looks at Long Island in the future and whether our younger generation can afford to stay here. It is my honor to have as my guests the following people who will inform me and the audience about this critical issue. They are, to my far right, Richard Skolnik, retired professor of American history at the City University of New York, author of several books on American history, African American history, Holocaust, and baseball. That's an interesting combination. Currently blogging on contemporary issues on www.catchmydrift.net. Sarah Bernardi, a student at SUNY Old Westbury, a junior majoring in politics, economics, and law, and a resident of Bayshore. Did I get that right, Sarah?
Yes, you did.
Okay. And Michael Morrison, a student at SUNY Old Westbury, a junior majoring in accounting and a resident of Hicksville. Richard, on a previous show, we had determined, let's briefly go over this, we had determined that we have an affordability problem on Long Island. Just run me through that quickly.
Well, the numbers indicate, for example, that the cost of living on Long Island is 142, 100 being the national norm, so we're about 42% higher than the rest of the country. In addition, our taxation system takes from the citizenry much more money than many other places, probably most places in the United States. Housing prices are considerably higher. The average, for whatever averages mean, the average currently on Long Island is $435,000 for a house. So with school taxes, with commuter fees, with the cost of education, with housing prices, we have a situation where, as I've mentioned, your bottom line expense before you get started really on Long Island is about $73,000 a year. So obviously you've got to earn significantly above that to live reasonably, comfortably, and in a secure fashion.
What we want to do today is give some sort of hope or help that the young students here today and in our audience and all over this campus and other campuses could decide when they graduate that they would like to stay here. So let's try to keep them here, because we lose them, we're going to lose a lot of our future. Sarah, Michael, why do you like Long Island? What is it about Long Island, beside your family, of course? Why do you like being here? Either one.
Personally, being from Bayshore, we have an amazing Main Street. They have a lot of stuff that you can do. There's a lot of great places to eat. Nice, fun area, and you have the ferries. You can go straight to Fire Island, and you're not far away from the city. And you can always go out to the Hamptons, Montauk. There's always somewhere to go.
Michael?
Yeah, I like the proximity to New York City, as well as the beaches here on Long Island are very nice. There are a lot of public parks in the smaller communities. There are a lot of public parks just within small neighborhoods, and I really enjoy the golf courses as well.
You like going to the city and things like that, the proximity?
Yeah, the culture in the city is very nice.
Okay. Richard, what else here that you find?
I like trees. I love trees, particularly this time of the year when they're blossoming and the grass is coming up and the sky is blue and the birds resume singing. So Nassau is very pretty. It's very nice. I mean, it's been marred and scarred along certain avenues. But as I was thinking today, if you go off the main roads and go into maybe 80% of the land area, you see lovely homes, lovely streets, quiet, kids on the street. In fact, home ownership on Long Island, the national average is just under 70%. Long Island home ownership is in the low 80s. So it's a suburb of homes, a bedroom suburb for many. And it was an escape. It was an escape for second-generation ethnic groups, for example. The Irish came out here, the Italians came out here, they left the city. It was exciting to come to Long Island, and a lot of that excitement remains, although I wonder with folks, younger folks who have lived on Long Island, whether that same excitement remains as it was for the first generations that came out here and saw themselves as sort of pioneers.
At home, when you're home, do your parents, do your friends, do they talk about the high expenses to live here? What do they talk to you about? What do they complain about, or what do they wish could be different? What are the main expenses here?
I'd probably say I know my parents pay a lot in property taxes a year. I mean, even commuting, if you work in the city, you're spending, during rush hour, maybe up to an hour 20 minutes just going to work, and that's just one way. So I know they complain a lot about that they don't want to live on Long Island once me and my brother graduate from college.
Where does your brother go?
He goes to Baruch in the city.
Okay. Michael, anything?
Yeah, my family have similar discussions. They want to move once everyone is out of the house and graduates. And unfortunately, the ones that are graduating really don't feel that they can afford to live here. And a lot of the discussions are, where are you going to live after you? And, unfortunately, they want to move out of state and into states where it's a little bit more affordable, the housing and the tax rates, and without any of the commuting at all.
Richard, is it just a matter of expenses and living here is difficult monetarily, or is that a excuse for all the other problems we have, traffic and anxiety and overcrowdedness and things like that, or is affordability an actual
Well, that's a
real
good
issue?
question. Obviously, it's a combination of factors. One, as I said before, the novelty has worn off for many people. They were born here, they've lived here. Now we have a high rate of college attendance on Long Island. So where do they go? Some, as Sarah, stays on the island, but others go off to colleges all over the country. They there for 4 or 5 years. They like the place. They may meet somebody and get married. I was speaking to a young man who kind of is conversant with what younger people are thinking, and he says to me, I know kids who've gone off to Texas, Florida, Arizona, North Carolina. They liked it, and they're remaining, at least for the time being. So it may not be forever. I mean, these kids may come back later on, but there's a big country to see, and maybe it's time some of them found the opportunity to do that. So sending them off to college is one way we may lose people. We're one of the oldest suburbs in the country, developed, and with it comes congestion and high taxes. And look, we had a bad storm. I mean, there are some people who are thinking, it's not once in a century, it might be far more often, so Long Island becomes a little problematical for some of these people. So there are still the pluses, as Mike points out, and as Sarah points out, those are going to remain. But more and more, some of the negatives creep in, and it therefore creates ambivalence on the part of many people.
Now, when we talk about Long Island, let's not forget, it's just not Nassau, it's
Right.
Suffolk also. Now, Sarah, you live in Suffolk, okay? And if I may ask you a question, not to be too personal, you did go away to college at one time.
Yeah.
Now, where did you go?
I went to Kendall College in Chicago.
Okay, and why did you come back?
One was for the major. They didn't have the major that I wanted, and it was $30,000 a year. And $30,000 a year is a lot of money, especially when you have another child going to college as well. It gets very pricey.
Okay. All right, so we've established then the affordability issue is difficult. My good friend Michael here did a survey around our campus. This was scientific or not scientific? A random survey?
It was randomly selected students, over 50. And I pretty much asked them basically, do you think you're going to be able to afford to live on Long Island once you get a job in the field that you've selected? And unfortunately, almost 85% of the students said either they were going to leave Long Island or that they didn't know why, but they couldn't afford to live here once they graduated.
But you have a job with Gallup after this anyway, okay? You do polling, all right? Is that okay?
That would work.
Incidentally, what he said is consistent with real so-called scientific polling, which pretty much confirms what your campus polling, that anywhere from in the 70s, 75% of young people are either likely or quite likely to be leaving Long Island in the near future. I presume these are kids mostly in their 20s.
And what I'm finding is that the trend to start a family is further down the road for a lot of these students. So 19 to 25 might be a young age group to ask this about. I just hope in the future that these students that are 19 to 25, when they do decide to settle down and start a family, that they'll come back to Long Island. And I would like to see affordable housing, a little bit of a cut for them in costs.
Well, sometimes young people say they want to do something, when the time comes they don't, but the fact that they're thinking about it is a real concern.
Mm-hmm. And the fact that they've acted on it. I mean, numbers show from the 90s on that the number of young people in the 25 to 34 age bracket has declined on Long Island pretty consistently. So they are living up to their talk. They are leaving. And whether they come back or not remains to be seen. But Mike also touched on an interesting point that kids are not getting married until much later these days. They're not having children until even further along. In fact, there's a show, I don't think it's started to air yet, Princesses. It's about young women on Long Island who are living with their parents, and they've made a show out of it. So they've obviously tapped into a phenomenon that is currently going on.
Well, let's look at Mike's survey for a second. Do you think that you will be able to afford living on Long Island when you graduate from school and get a job in your field? And maybe 40 out of 45 said no or not sure. Only 4 said yes. Do you plan on leaving Long Island solely because it's too expensive? Many said the reason, yes. They're not leaving because they do not like their family. They're not leaving because of certain other things. They're leaving because it's too expensive. And many of the reasons for expensive is that their parents say the taxes are too high and the cost of the house is too much. So, Richard, can we give these young people any hope that there's any solutions down the line that will reduce this burden of expenses for these people?
Well, let's have a little historical perspective. Americans have always moved from the get-go. Young people have always moved. Regions have lamented the fact, whether it be rural America, New England America, Rust Belt America, young people have always moved. They're in a position to move. They're adventurous. And therefore, this is part of a larger phenomenon that we shouldn't just lay the blame on Long Island. This is what young people do, and more power to them. What may be helpful, although at the moment it's not, is rental properties on Long Island. Compared to Westchester County and Lower Connecticut and other areas that are contiguous or close by, the number of rental properties on Long Island is about 19 or 20%. It's considerably higher in Westchester. It's about 37%. So the idea is if we could construct rental properties, hopefully in downtown areas, we might be on the road to solution, particularly if it was accessible to transportation. I mean, in my town, in Rockville Center, Avalon Bay came in, a major developer, and built 300-odd apartments rentals within walking distance to the train station. I should add that the town fought it for a long time. Again, there's a resistance. You know, you hear on the South Shore at least this term Queensification. You know, we don't want Long Island to become another Queens. Mm-hmm. And that kind of sentiment and that kind of nostalgia for the 50s does weigh heavily. And in our town, we held it up for years. Avalon Bay ended up suing Rockville Center, collecting a lot of money from them, built the project, and everyone seems quite pleased with the way it's worked out. So there's that kind of resistance, that kind of nostalgia, which is then reinforced by zoning and permit issues that slow up what could be an answer to Mike and Sarah's hoping that Long Island could become more affordable.
Well, Mike and Sarah, we've talked about this, and maybe I got it wrong, guys, but the fact is when Richard says people have moved, in the past people have moved, children have moved, but in many cases their parents were able to help them. Mm-hmm. in their move, whether helping them with a home or an apartment or something. The way it is now, what I'm getting, in the future, you may not be able to help your children the way your parents have helped you. Is that a concern? Is that a concern to not live here, to start somewhere new, so you can help your children a little more because you'll have more money?
That's kind of like a difficult question because I feel if I lived somewhere where it'd be cheaper, I could definitely, like, you know, Georgia, South Carolina, I could afford to pay for my kids' college tuition because I know my parents have done that for me, their parents have done that for them. So just like as a pretty much family has always helped their children, I would feel guilty if I didn't do that. So I feel if I lived on Long Island and I wanted to pay, if my children did want to go to a private school and I couldn't help them pay for it, there's that little guilt that, you know, my parents helped me and I'm not going to be able to help my kids.
So you would theoretically think of leaving your family because you don't want your future to be here because of expenses?
Well, a lot of my family's moving off of Long Island.
For
expense reasons. I mean, you know, gets cold in the winter, gets hot in the summer. My family, we more of warmer climate people, okay. So moved to Arizona. It's cheaper in Arizona, and it's warmer.
Richard, your children still live here, or they?
Yeah, they came back. I mean, they went off to college out of state, and two of them, and maybe a third, two of them currently live on Long Island. But again, they are, one certainly would agree, upper middle class, and the question of affordability is not prominent in their calculations. So, as I've spoken about earlier, when the middle class is being squeezed, elderly people have similar problems on Long Island as the younger generation too. I mean, we're not going to talk about that, but they're being squeezed as well. And then when you throw in the interesting point about parents helping their children, which has traditionally been a route enabling kids to at least get their first home started, pension systems have eroded to some degree. We discover that people's savings are not adequate for their needs. In other words, a coming generation is not going to have the means. The baby boomers probably still have the means. The stock markets come back, home prices have increased, so they may have the means to help the younger folk get along, at least initially. But down the road, we are facing a situation where older people are going to just have enough for themselves. And therefore, the old pattern of helping kids get started may be broken.
Well, these two young people are juniors. They're going to graduate soon. Where are the jobs here? Even if they wanted to stay here, where are the jobs on Long Island?
Well, we are a service economy. Manufacturing, as we've noted in the past, has not eroded, but has diminished when our aerospace industry went out and all the attendant companies that clustered around it. So it is a service economy, people doing things for each other, whether it be nails or beauty parlor or pizzeria or ice cream parlor or whatever. Problem is those jobs don't pay particularly well. In fact, the Bureau of Labor suggests that of the 10 fastest growing job categories, around 7 barely pay enough to lift you out of poverty. I mean, you know, we've read about fast food workers making $8.75 an hour, $8 an hour. Figure that out for the year, and they come away with next to nothing. So we've got to develop, as we've heard, high-tech industries. We've got to somehow, raise minimum wages, although that won't be the answer. It's tough. It's
But
tough.
that's a long-range project.
Yeah.
Well, what are we going to do in the next year, 2, 3?
Very little.
Oh.
I mean, again, we're dealing with monumental glacial-like issues, some of which are out of our control. I mean, if the whole economy is tanking, Long Island, which still is the 12th richest county in the nation, is going to be hurt too. On the other hand, the good news is cities have come back to popularity. I mean, the first wave that came out here rejected the city. Young people like yourselves see the city in quite a different way. And so they're filling up Astoria, and they're filling up Williamsburg, and they're filling up Harlem, and they're coming to the Lower East Side. So when you speak to young people, as I do, they're in the city. And, will you come back to the island? We'll see. But they're in no rush. They're not getting married. They're not having children immediately. So the whole pace, the whole necessity of, setting up shop. And I'm not so sure the old notion of having your own home ownership, the lawn, the backyard, I'm not sure how compelling that is. I mean, I'd ask you, is that something you're fixated on or not necessarily?
I know that used to be the American dream,
Yeah.
Owning your own home. I don't see that as big of a deal as they talk about in like the history books.
Because you had your own home, right?
Yeah.
So
I wouldn't mind renting. It wouldn't bother me.
Uh-huh. And Mike,
I think home ownership is a better thing for everyone. And it definitely in the long term for a family that's first starting.
so ultimately, people
for
would
me and people,
gravitate back to the home,
certainly.
maybe in their late 30s, perhaps.
But
Yeah.
it's sad to see. I was in the Rockville Center School District the other day. I was getting a paper, and I ran into someone taking his fingerprints, and he wants to be a teacher. Okay, he said, I'm going to try to get something here, but I'm going to probably go to Delaware and somewhere else. I don't think there's anything here for me. And you have a lot of young people who want to enter, say, the field of education. Why can't Long Island fit those people in? I think we can do that.
Well, we're not growing. As we've heard before, if you grow, you need new teachers, you need new electricians, you need new construction companies. We are virtually stagnant in terms of population. That's a tough situation to operate under. We've got the infrastructure, we've got the costs, but we don't have increasing numbers of people to feed it, to be taxed. Let me just say one point before we lament it too much. Just as the ethnic groups, Jewish Americans, Italian Americans, Irish Americans came out to the island and gave it its vitality, now we're seeing Latinos, we're seeing African Americans, we're seeing Asian, Southeast Asian. There's an infusion and a growing infusion of young people who you see all over who are getting jobs, going into business. So for them, it's the new frontier as it was for our parents or grandparents. So there is excitement, in a sense, on a level that we really haven't addressed.
Yes, Mike.
I think Richard makes a good point that there's really no quick fix for this, and that it is like glacial movements and gigantic things that have to change. We basically need to encourage investment and broaden our industrial tax base and create the right kinds of jobs, not these lower jobs that aren't really going to make it feasible for people to stay on Long Island. And I think that's a good point, that, we need the right types of jobs.
Yeah, my town has endless number of nail places, which is fine, it's private enterprise, but that's not a growth industry that pays particularly well. Yeah. So as you say, we've got to conceive of areas, healthcare, education, technology, information systems where the payoff for those who are, and again, we've got to, unfortunately, it's a glacial task to re-educate some of the workforce too, who find themselves out of employment for a long period of time because their skills are no longer applicable to what the job market's calling for.
Well, I think we all have friends, and we have only a few minutes left. I wish we can go on with this, but this will be a later time. But we all have friends who have moved to areas, other parts of the country, North Carolina, Virginia, and they have beautiful homes, and the houses are much less expensive, and the property taxes are nil. And if you say Virginia, some of the finest schools are state universities, University of Virginia, etc. Could we learn something from them, or we can't do it here, or what is the, because people will go to those places. It's not like, they're nice too.
Well, remember that those prices you mentioned are correct, but the salaries are also commensurately lower.
But probably not.
I'm not so sure.
Okay.
I'm not so sure. I mean, the average teacher's salary across the country is about $48,000 to $50,000. Well, if you make that kind of money, you might be hard pressed to buy yourself a house in that range. But, you know, by and large, you're probably right that the cost of living, well, as I mentioned before, ours is 42% higher than the rest of the country, so that says something.
Before we close up, we got a couple of minutes. Where do you see your future? Where do you see your future? Where do you want to be, and what would it take to keep you here?
I don't see myself living on Long Island just because it is so expensive, and I would probably not even live in the city. I'd probably go to a different down south. I mean, I can get a house that's $600,000 on Long Island. I can go get a nice house in Georgia for a lot cheaper, and it looks the same.
It's a problem because I don't hate to lose people like this. Yes, Michael.
I feel myself, I would like to stay here, and I'm probably going to do whatever it takes. Save my money and try and get a higher paying job in the city, and maybe commute for the first 5 years of my home ownership.
See, Richard, we've talked about this before, and these issues are, you're right, you made points. But we've talked about that 5 years ago and 10 years ago.
Yes, that's true.
Nothing seems, now we're 5 and 10 years later, and nothing seems to have been done.
Well, we bought ourselves a little time. We encouraged women to go into the workforce. I mean, they wanted to, and finally they did in a big way, so that kept households from going under. And of course, we extended credit like crazy, so people borrowed on their houses and maintained their lifestyle that was, in a sense, unaffordable back then. So we bought time with the first wave that came out here, the husband worked, the wife stayed home with the kids, took him to the station in the station car. Now the wife goes off to work, and the husband does if he can get a job. And two worker families have been what we've bought time with, enabling people to afford it and borrowing off their houses and easy credit. And unfortunately, that means that that can't go on forever.
Let's leave this on an optimistic note. So you feel that some things in the future are looking better?
Well, as I've said on other occasions, I think to make this kind of discussion now, when we haven't yet surfaced from the Great Recession, is not a time to be overly optimistic, because we've all battened down the hatches and are not overly sanguine. But I think as the economy picks up, a rising tide lifts all boats, and I think we may be in a better position to do some of the things that need to be done.
Okay, these boats will have to dock now because we're just about done. I want to thank my guests for such an informative and thought-provoking show. Richard, always a pleasure. We'll continue this along the way. And Sarah and Michael, I want to thank you for your knowledge and insight. I also want to thank Old Westbury for a beautiful studio, especially Sherry, who's been so helpful to me, and her crew, Megan, also. We will continue this at another time. Until next time, this is Joe Haynor wishing you a good day and a better tomorrow.